What is up, guys? Randomodium here with your Week 5 Fantasy LCS analysis and prediction video. In this video, I'm going to break down all the matchups for NA and EU LCS for Week 5. And I definitely apologize for getting out this video a little bit later than I normally do. Work has been kicking my ass even harder than Origin's been getting their ass kicked in the EU LCS. But thankfully, everybody at my job actually really appreciates what I do. And I'm not a perpetual disappointment like Dignitas has been this split. With that, let's get into the actual analysis for this week. So for the EU strategy, we've already gone over this multiple times. But if it's in purple, that means that the team's got 2 matches that week, and you should probably look at playing them. If it's in green, that means you want to pick up the players that week because they've got a 2 match week coming up. If it's in yellow, that means that they're playing 1 match that week, but you probably want to keep them on your bench because they've got a 2 match week coming up. And if it's in red, that means you want to drop them from the team because they no longer have any 2 match weeks. So we just got finished up with week 4, so you should be dropping your G2 and H2K players because they no longer have any weeks where they have 2 matches per week. And you should be looking to get Splice and Fnatic players for week 5. You should also be looking at Unicorns of Love and Misfits because they've got a 2 match week coming up in week 6. And I'd probably hold off on Vitality, Giants, Rocket, and Origin. They've got 2 match weeks coming up in week 7, 8, and 9, but those teams haven't been really performing that well. Alright, so for your week strategy, if the win-loss is in white, that means I think it's going to be a normal game with normal number of fantasy points. If it's in red, that means I think it's going to be a stomp, which usually means less fantasy points for both teams, especially the loser. And if it's in blue, that means I think it's going to be a close game, possibly an upset, and those are the games that produce the most fantasy points. Those are the games that usually go, 45, 50 minutes in length, maybe even an hour, and they produce a ton of fantasy points. So those are the games that you want to keep an eye on to rack up a lot of fantasy points. Alright, S-tier teams this week: FlyQuest, Cloud9, EchoFox, and Splice. FlyQuest looked a little bit shaky in week 4. I think they're going to bounce back. I do think that they're slightly better than TSM, and I think they will be able to win a very close match against TSM, and they should be able to beat Dignitas, no issues. Cloud9, still looking very, very strong. They're going against Phoenix 1 and TSM. TSM does not want to lose a second match against Cloud9. They already lost 1 match against Cloud9. They do not want to lose a second match against Cloud9. So I expect that TSM is going to come out, guns blazing against Cloud9. However, I do think that Cloud9 still is the better team, and I think that they have a better chance of winning than TSM does. So I do have Cloud9 as the slight favored in that matchup. Next up is EchoFox. They had a phenomenal week 4. They're going against Envy and Immortals this week. I think that they're going to put up, S-tier numbers yet again. They were actually some of the highest point scorers in week 4. So I expect them to be, near the top again for week 5. I think they should be able to beat Envy, no issue. Immortals will be a tougher opponent, but I do think that EchoFox has got the edge. And then my final team, Splice. They're going to Fnatic and Rocket. I think they'll beat Rocket, no issues. I am expecting Splice to beat Fnatic, which I think some people will consider an upset. Splice has definitely looked like it's the more solid team. Fnatic has been having issues in the jungle, and they just haven't been looking that great. Like Caps, for example, is a great player, but he goes for a lot of solo queue moments, like things that look cool, but aren't necessarily the best idea from an LCS kind of strategy perspective. He goes for like the solo kills rather than like the big macro strategy. So I don't think that the Fnatic has really put it all together yet, this split. My A tier, I've got CLG, TSM, and Phoenix 1. CLG is going up against Immortals and Liquid. I am confident that CLG will win one of their matchups this week. I do not think they're going to win both of them, and I'm not sure which matchup they're going to win. But I'm confident that they're going to go 1-1 this week. I think they have a better chance at beating Team Liquid than they do at beating Immortals, which is why I say they're going to lose to Immortals and beat Team Liquid. If CLG is able to beat both those teams, they will probably be S tier this week. CLG has been looking a lot better than in the beginning of the split, but they still haven't found that same magic that they had last year. So I think that they're rapidly improving and they're really rising, but they're not quite there yet. TSM has got like an impossible week this week. They've got FlyQuest and Cloud9. I think they're going to lose very close matches in both of their games. I think that they're going to focus more on Cloud9 than FlyQuest because they don't want to lose a second match to Cloud9 because that would put them really far behind as far as like the head-to-head in order to get like that #1 seed for the playoffs. So I think they're going to devote most of their attention this week to Cloud9, which may be a mistake because you can't sleep on FlyQuest. So I think that TSM has a better chance of beating FlyQuest, but I don't think that they're going to devote a lot of time to FlyQuest this week. They're going to devote more time to Cloud9, which is going to end up costing them both matches this week. And my final A-tier team is going to be Phoenix 1. They're playing Cloud9 and Envy. I think they're going to lose to Cloud9, but though it should be relatively close, and they should be able to beat Envy with no major issues. My B-tier teams, I've got Immortals, Liquid, and Fnatic. So Immortals are going against CLG and Echo Fox. I do think they're going to lose to Echo Fox, and I do give them the slight advantage against CLG, though it's very possible that CLG will upset them. Liquid is going against Dignitas and CLG. Liquid has been kind of hit or miss. I think they'll be able to beat Dignitas, but I think that CLG is the slightly better team right now than Liquid is. And then finally we've got Fnatic. They're going against Splice and Origin. As we've already talked about, I think that Splice is going to upset Fnatic. Fnatic's really been struggling, especially in the jungle. And I do think that Fnatic's going to beat Origin, but my concern is that Fnatic is going to beat Origin way too fast. They're going to have like 20-minute games, and that's going to mean that Fnatic is not going to get a lot of points this week from Origin. Alright, my C-tier teams, I've got Unicorns of Love, G2, Dignitas, Envy, and Misfits. And yes, I do think that Unicorns of Love and G2 are going to get more fantasy points this week than Dignitas and Envy on average. If you look at actually the stats, like Unicorns of Love has been putting up some ridiculous fantasy points, even though they've only been playing one match per week. So I'm incredibly impressed with Unicorns of Love. I mean, G2 is one of the best teams in NA as well. And actually, Unicorns of Love is playing G2 this week, and I'm expecting an upset. I'm expecting that Unicorns of Love is going to upset G2. I do think that G2 is the better team, but I think that Unicorns of Love has something special planned for G2, and probably like in the pick ban phase, they're going to pull out some pocket pick that they've been saving the whole season, and it's really going to take G2 by surprise. And I wouldn't be surprised if they actually pulled this thing out in Game 3 of the series. So I do think that Unicorns of Love is going to win a very close series against G2 and hand G2 their first loss. Next up, Dignitas are going against Liquid and FlyQuest. I think they're going to lose both of their matches. And yeah, I think they're constantly a C-tier team. So I don't think that they're going to rise up much above C-tier. Envy is going up against Echo Fox and Phoenix 1. They are also like a C-tier or bordering on D-tier team. So I would not play anybody from Envy this week. And then my final C-tier team is Misfits. They're going against Vitality. They should be able to win that match. D-tier, I've got H2K. I do think they're going to beat Giants this week, but my concern is that they're going to beat Giants too quickly, which is going to reduce the number of fantasy points they're going to get. And then the rest of the D-tier teams, Vitality, Rocket, Giants, and Origin, they're all playing only one match this week, and I think they're going to lose all of their matches, which is going to result in them being in D-tier. Alright, so team strategy. So if a particular week is in purple, that means that the player was performing better than their teammates this week. If it's in yellow, that means the player was performing worse than their teammates that week. If it's in green, that means that the team had a victory there, or I got the correct team grade. If it's in red, that means that the team lost that matchup, or that I got the incorrect team grade. And the blue rectangle is the current week that we're on, which is week 5. So for week 5, FlyQuest going against TSM and Dignitas, I think they're going to win both those matchups. I think they're going to be S tier across the board. Cloud9 going against Phoenix 1 and TSM, I think they're going to win both those matchups. I think that they're going to be pretty much S tier across the board, though with Impact and Ray kind of subbing in, I think that that's going to drop Impact kind of like 8 tier, because he might not get the full fantasy points for all of the matches. And then Sneaky has actually been playing kind of worse than his team overall, so I think he's more A tier this week. For Echo Fox, they've been playing phenomenal, especially Acadian and Froggen. Looper's really also been picking things up as well, so I think that they're definitely S tier. Keith and Gate have been a little bit more suspect. They've been playing a little bit better as of late, but I think they're more A tier this week. And then as a team, I think that Echo Fox could definitely get S tier points. And then finally, Splice, I think they're going to be S tier across the board. I think that that's really going to be driven by having a really close match with Fnatic, and then they should get decent points against Rockhat as well. A tier, CLG, Darshan absolutely went off in week 4, and I think that CLG is finding that magic again. CLG plays the best when they run 1-4 comps where they have Darshan on a split pusher, and I would not be surprised if in week 5 they go back to that style where they have Darshan on a hard carry like a Fiora or a Jace or something like that, and then just have him split push the entire game and then just run a 4v4 with the rest of the team, which CLG is very good at winning that with Aphromu's shot calling. So I think Darshan has the potential to be S tier. The rest of the team will be A tier. TSM, I think they're going to be a pretty solid A tier team this week, even though they're losing. I think they're going to lose both their matches this week. Sven Skaren has been performing worse than the rest of his team. He's been C tier the past 2 weeks. I think he's going to improve slightly and move into B tier this week. Phoenix One, another quickly rising team. The real stars on that team, from my perspective, are Nori and Arrow. I think that they have the potential to be S tier this week. The rest of the team, I think, is going to be A tier. Immortals has been incredibly hit or miss. You can just see from their grades, sometimes they're D tier and sometimes they're S tier. I'm hoping that they're going to kind of stabilize this week. I've got, Flame as a B tier, Dardoch as A tier, Pobelter as C tier because he's been C tier every week except for week 4. Cody's Sun, I have him up in A tier because he's actually been performing a lot better. And then Ollie and their team at B tier again. So overall B tier, but there's a lot of versatility or variability in the Immortals lineup as far as who's going to get what tier. Team Liquid, looking a bit better, especially Reignover. Lorlo had kind of an off week last week. I think he's going to do a little bit better. I think that's mainly because teams are targeting him a lot more because they realize that he's kind of the carry on Team Liquid right now. I really need Piglet to step it up. He played a lot better in week 4, but he didn't really show it in the fantasy points. So I think that he'll be around B tier again this week. But if Team Liquid's going to be successful, it's really got to be Reignover and Piglet stepping up to kind of into those hard carry roles. They can't just rely on Lorlo to carry the team. Alright, and then finally, Fnatic. I think they're going to be kind of a mix of B tier and C tier. Fnatic's just having a ton of issues in jungle. They played their backup jungler in week 4. I don't know who's going to be playing this week, if it's going to be Amazing or their backup, but they're just struggling a lot. And I think that Soaz, Caps, and Reckles should be B tier, but Jesses and whoever their jungler is will probably be around C tier. Unicorns of Love, these guys have been playing phenomenal. Like, you can see that even though they only had one match last week, Vivisachi, Xerxes, and Exile were all B tier. B tier with only one match, and they were B tier. That's unheard of. So they got, half the matches as some of these other teams, and yet they still outpointed, the majority of the teams. That's just insane. That's just incredibly impressive from Unicorns of Love, and I'm really looking forward to their week 6, where they're probably going to be S tier across the board. This week, I think it's possible that Vivisachi and Xerxes will be B tier. The rest of the team will be around C tier. G2, great team, obviously, but their fantasy points have been kind of hit or miss just because they stomp a lot of teams. I think this week they should get some pretty good fantasy points for only having one match. because they're going against Unicorns of Love. I think that the person who's most likely to be B tier would be Mithy. It could possibly be X-Spec too, but I think that it's more likely that just about across the board they're going to be C tier. Dignitas. Oh man. So you can see all the yellow showing that how they've got a lot of people who are underperforming. I think they're going to be around C tier across the board. X Special had just an awful week 4. He had one of the lowest fantasy points out of anyone, both NA and EU. So I think that if anybody's going to be D tier this week, it'll probably be X Special on Dignitas. But I think they're going to be roughly C tier across the board. Envy, they've been C tier and D tier pretty much the entire split. You can see they've had a couple people score higher than that, but it's really been kind of hit or miss. I think this week they're going to be on average around C tier across the board. Misfits, another team that when they only have one match, they're C tier. A couple of them occasionally are B tier. I think they're going to be around C tier across the board just because I don't think that the matches against Vitality are going to last as long as the matches they had against Fnatic and Splice. H2K going against Giants. They will be Giants, but I think they're going to be D tier across the board. Vitality, another team that I think is going to be D tier across the board. I actually really like the switch they made last week where they put GBM at mid and they put Nukeduck at support. I think that works really well for Vitality. I think they're a much better team when they do that, and it makes sense because a lot of mid lane mages are kind of going into the support role. The Malzahar, Zyra, things like that. So Nukeduck is actually a perfect support in this meta, and I think GBM is a underrated mid laner as well. So I hope that they continue with that roster lineup. I think that Hachani has been really bad at support, and he's really kind of been bringing the team down. So hopefully they keep the lineup with GBM and Nukeduck. But I definitely think that they're not worth picking up. Maybe in week 7 you might want to pick them up because they're going against Giants and Roccat, and that could be a good week for them. Roccat, another team that's really struggling. I think they're going to be D tier across the board. Same with Giants, D tier across the board. And then Origin, definitely D tier across the board. They've had some of the lowest fantasy points, as we already talked about. Hiva had negative fantasy points this week. Wisdom had less than 1 fantasy point. And just everybody's doing really poorly on that team. So they're definitely the bottom of the barrel team in the EU side of things. All right, so let's talk about my record. So if I get greater than 80% right, I consider that an S, which is in purple. If I get in the 70s, I consider that an A, and it's in red. If it's in the 60s, I consider it a B, and it's in blue. If it's in the 50s, I consider that a C, and it's green. If I get less than 50%, I consider that a D, and it's in yellow. So this past week, I got 65% of the overall average grades for the team correct. So if I said the team was going to be a B tier team, then 65% of the time they actually were a B tier team. And then as far as the predicting the results for the matches, I was 81% correct. So 13 out of the 16 matches, I correctly predicted the victor of those matches. So you can see that I'm averaging, kind of high 50s, low 60s as far as the correct grade is concerned, and I'm averaging high 70s, low 80s as far as the correct victor is concerned. So doing pretty well. I'd like to get those numbers a little bit higher by the end of the split, but safe to say I think that my predictions are pretty accurate so far, especially with all the distractions I've been having. And speaking of distractions, I might as well talk about all the travel that I have coming up in the near future. I'm actually leaving on Wednesday to go on job hunting and interviews across the country. I'm going to be gone for approximately 3 weeks doing that. So I'll be doing all my videos on the road. So audio and video quality might be a little bit worse. And then I'll be back working for like a little bit over a week. And then I'm going to Europe because my wife and I never got a honeymoon. So we're going to be taking a nice long honeymoon for a couple weeks in Europe. trying to hit, some of her family. She's Italian, and she's actually got family that she talks to in Italy, so we're going to try and meet up with them. So it should be tons of fun, but definitely will. I'm not even sure if I'll be able to do videos in Italy because I don't know if I'll have, a good computer and a good internet connection. But we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So until about April 1st, I'm going to be traveling pretty much nonstop. So it's going to be very hard for me to be uploading videos until about April 1st. And then after that, I'm getting out of the military, and then I'm going to be moving cross country and then starting a new job. So it's not going to get any easier after April 1st either. So I am committed to you guys. I am committed to putting out videos as often as I can, but just bear with me because I've got a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, a lot of transitions going on, a lot of travel going on. So, be patient with me. And thank you guys for all of the support you've been giving me. It definitely is really appreciated, all the kind comments you guys have been leaving. So, yeah, if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do subscribe. It definitely helps me out. I'd like to hit, over 1,000 subs, hopefully by the end of the year. And if you have any questions or comments, definitely leave a comment below. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have. I hope you all have a fantastic day. This is Randomonium, signing off.